Hey people, here's my face. I don't show it in all my videos. It's an extra step, to go out and find some good lighting and then have to transfer it from my phone to the computer. My main object is to show you how the writings read, but I'm not afraid to show my face. And I lost a couple subscribers in that last video, and I hope it was the Christians and not the gay community. I read what it says, and I laugh, and when I laugh, I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing at me for all the things that I've been told, and I'll tell you the story about one of the smartest people I know, and how dumb we felt because his girlfriend didn't know what an electric can opener was. We were so ignorant, we didn't realize that just 40 miles north of us, there's people in the country that never seen an electric can opener before. I laughed because I was laughing at us. We both think we're the smartest thing on the planet, and we didn't know this. But I'm not trying to offend anybody. When the Bible says faggot, I'm going to say faggot. When the Bible says nigger, I'm going to say nigger. I'm going to read it as it's written. But my main objective here is to wake up the Christians, That's who's got their head up their ass. They're good people. They just lack the ability to think for themselves. They're a strong power when they all come together, but they don't know who's steering. They don't know who's steering the ship. They don't have a clue. But I'm going to show you some proof here today that Wikipedia's in cahoots to try to make you ignorant.
In yesterday's movie, I was talking about the Greek creation of man, and I was going to put it beside the Hebrew here and show you the differences, show you the similarities. And this word, this is in Excel menu. And I told you years ago, Excel was the Egyptian sign for the front half of the lion. Let us make man in our image in Excel, in out front. And manu that's my mama's French, and that's what she called the female cat. Manu and Matu is the male. In front, female cat. And, I don't always go back. Sometimes I tell you something and you can take my word for it or not. I don't always go back and try to find the proofs, and this is the main reason. They've been removed. And I know that I've seen this years ago, and there's more explanation here. And this was called Excel. It's out front, the foremost. And then down a little lower here, you'll see the rear of it. And it was dino. It was power, the back part, the strength. And you see how they really don't have anything to say. But years ago when I looked at this, they had their own page. You had a blue here. You could click on that blue, and it had a whole page to talk about that. But I can go up to the top of the page and click on this view history, and it's going to bring me a list of all the edits that happened, and it's going to show all the dates and a little bit of information on who changed what. And you come on down to the bottom, this goes to 2021. You come on down to the bottom, it give you how many edits they'll show, because it's been edited for a while. You go way back to the beginning, here, March 2011, and you see it was just a little piece of the page. It wasn't near what it is today. They didn't have near the amount of information here. And so I try to find a date. I try to remember about the time that I may have been reading that. And I clicked here on February 2019. And it's got a lot more of the page here now. And you come on down past the animals, and then it shows parts of animals. And here's the front of the line. It still has no information here. But we can see on the back half, physical force and strength, dino, the power. And see also the fore part of the line, what is foremost, what excels. And I feel like it was me when I made this connection of Excel to this Hebrew, they call it Egyptian Excel. I feel that's what caused them to change it and remove it. So, I told you before that the Bible, it used to have pictures that went with it. It had a frontispiece and probably for every chapter and in betweens. It had pictures, and it helped people to read this. But this is the picture that was on front of the Greek Bible. This is what went with the first day, and this is what the creation's explaining. This is the eye of Ra, the right eye of Ra. It was his protection. It was his feminine counterpart. And it's not talking about the creation of man, it's talking about the creation of woman. Like I said, if I was God and I done created the world and I created a paradise, I didn't do it for a man, I did it for a woman. I created a woman to put in it, not a man. But you see the most important thing here, this is half. And so this is symbolized by this here. And this is the nose, and it's smell. And that's the first thing that happened. On the first day, I smelled something. And also on that first day, I turned on the lights. I went to look, a quarter. First you smell something. Then you go investigate, turn on the lights and have a look at it. And then you give it some thought. And that means to divide the waters from above from the waters below. Here in line 2, in the beginning God created heaven and earth, blah, blah, blah. That's not what it says. And the earth was unseen, unready, and darkness was upon the abyss. And the Spirit of God bore, pneumata, the wind, the smell. It's in the wind, and smelled. And so that's when he went to turn on the light. You see, that's the same base word, the breath of life. And when he breathed the breath of life and force upon of to up knowing and sex. This is a Z-E. You don't see it in this Bible. It doesn't have all the markings. But this Omega sometimes reads as E-C-H. Sex. Z-E-C-H-S. And the force upon of to up knowing sex, the smell. When have to of on their oppose his such in Susan that turns the lily. And God said, and wise and it has, turn on the lights so we can get a look at this. What is the cause? What is the cause that I'm smelling? And then on the second day, and then divided the waters from above to the waters below, to divide the waters, to give it some thought. And then, take it to the synagogue, put it all together. This is what's going on earth. And the Hebrew word for the earth is ears, what you hear. And so this is all about the calendar, and that's where this comes from. That's where your word calendar come from. And article, a periodical comes around at that time, article. And having to Hesper, the evening star, Venus, and having to pray. I was in Bahrain back about 91, and I went out and got drunk, and I missed the night shuttle. And so about 3, 4 in the morning, I went and lay down on the shuttle. It's a little boat. He's got the job of shuttling goods and people to shore when your boat's too big to make a pier. And I woke up before the sunrise, and I see this Muslim. He laid out his carpet on the boat. I'm laid out on the front drunk, and I open an eye and see, and I give him his respect and stay quiet, because he pray. In the morning, he pray. We've having to his fear, the sun goes down. Back in the day, everybody was scared. Is the sun going to come back? We need the sun. They worship the sun. His fear, Hesifer. And when have to pray. Oh, here's the sun. Time to get up and pray. Thank you, Ra. Come the Ra, come the sun, and come her at right. And that's the day you write it. And that's also, the ear. It's on the right side. This is the nose on the left side. This is the right eye. This is the ear, what you hear. Only a 16th of what you hear. Quarter what you see. Half of what you smell. eighth of what you think. And then after that, this is the first day. It's the second day. It's the third day. And the fourth day is the taste. That's the tongue here. The smell. They got these backwards. This should be turned this way. This is the nose inside. This is the ear outside. But the smell, you smell it, the pneumata. And then the sight, see what caused it. And then the thought, divide the waters. The third day is the ears, hearing. And then the fourth day, to take a taste. And in the Hebrew, this is R first, and enjoy. Some people might read that, B, and then a J-O-Y. But actually it's, the I-O reads as a E, and the O-I reads as a Vav. It's review. This is the day of review, to look back over everything, review. But it's also, it's your first day off. Wednesday was the first enjoy. You'll see that on the seventh day. That was the second enjoy. That was his view. So that was the day, and all the work that he had done, and his work with each he had done, who break all him at all him a time, T-I-U-M. Yum is a period of light. And break all him a time is view, to take some time and look back at it, is enjoy. And so this was the day of the stars, let there be luminaries, firmament of the heaven, for giving light upon the earth, part between the day and between the night. Let them be for signs and times, and years, and let them be for the cause in, giving light in the firmament of the heaven as to shine upon the earth. And it was so. And made luminaries great to light the day, and lesser for the night, and the stars, and put them in God's firmament of the heaven to shine upon the earth, begin the day and the night. And it was good, and hidden it has an article, a certain amount of time, an article on. And there was Hesper, and there was pray comer at the tard, a tardy. Took a day off on the 4th, took a day off. Didn't make it to school that day, was tardy. And then come the 5th day, the day of the hand, the touch, the feeling. And you'll see that's the word that I pronounce as pimped, P-E-M-P-T-H, pimped. But it's actually, and when have to sphere, and when have to pray, calm her of empathy, feeling on the 5th. And then on the 6th day, you put it all together, and it's the whole. The whole isn't quite the whole, though, because the first day, you have a half and a quarter. You got 3/4. And then the second day, you got an eighth. You're at 7/8. And then the third day, you add a 16th to that. You're at 15/16. And then on the 4th day, you take your first enjoy. You take your tardy day and get a taste. And so then you're at 30 seconds. Then the 5th day, it comes the feel, and you're at 63/64. And so it's never the whole until you look at the whole picture. So on the 6th day, it's wise end, knowing. Wise in it has, knowing it has. It's a gadget. It's a gauge to Egypt's, which in Susan a Cadigan as. And wise in it has, knowing it has, it's a gauge to, it's a gadget, and it's not just a gadget, but it's a gadgeta, a feminine gadget. That Egypts, in the land of Egypts, and Egypt's, which in turns a cadage, what's being served, a catagen as. Susan, Lily was the light at night, you see the lily on her head, the 12 positions of the light at night, the 12 positions of the moon. And catagen, this is cater, but a catagen, is full grown. When your hair is full grown before its dying period, when it stops growing before its dying period, is a catagen. But this is the cater. The cater is the one serving, and the catage is what's being served. When Susan, a catagen as tetrapoda on all fours, where feet of there what is gis. And this is where the word impede comes from. It means in front of you. Compete, all comes from this word. The tetrapoda, 4 feet of, AV, of here, peed, here in front. And there what the IA reads as a W, evolve. And there what is gis. Gis is this location. And serves, and served, catagen as, when have to utus. And utus, you see this come up in here. I got all of the Greek first chapter here in color coded, and it's in when have to utus. And you see it come up here once, twice. This is the 6th day, the 5th day, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it's different on the first day, when have to cause. When have to cause, and then you have the 6th when have to utus. And so this eye of Ra, the Egyptian word for this was widget. Widget. The right eye of Ra. The independent goddess, a feminine counterpart to Ra. A violent force that subdues his enemies. It's a protection against evil. You see it out here on the front of the boat. They put it on the front of the boats here. And this is 2 forms of thought. And widget, which also goes by the name of utus in the Greek. Widget, also known as the green one, whereas utu, the Greek, the utu. And it means out, and out to give birth. Widget was closely associated in ancient Egyptian religion with the eye of Ra, the eye of Horus. It's a gadgeta. It's a gadget, and the eta mean it's feminine. And it's a gadget. Egypts, which in Susan, Lily, a catagen serves and as a tetrapoda, a 4-foot, where in the way, where in the way of there what is jizz. Jizz was a Sumerian penis. It's also this location, this jizz. It's also the earth that's on the bottom of a statue where it talks about epithages. That's the place where the epithages is written. You see it here in this symbol. You'll see this shape under the statue, and this end is tapered over here. This is the front. And it's a GS. When it's just pointing out, it's letting you know it's on the front of it, the jizz. What's written on the front of the statue down at the foot, the epithages, what's written on the ground. And it's, at your stance, where you stand. That's where a pith of jizz would come from. And the catechin and what is served as when have to otus, to get you a taste. And the fuse in it has to, the O-I reads a U-E-S-E-N. And we fuse in, we put it together. We fuse and it has to there what is just this location. The served, what is served, catechin as, and tactin check, adagin, association, and tactin check, adagin, association. Tact coming from touch, sensitivity, and tactin, and the sensitivity, the check, adagin, and you could tell that this is an Irish word, an adagin as adagin association. Adagin is to know or to recognize, to perceive, understanding, according to their type, and tactin check, adagin association, what its family, what it's related to, the type, association. This old Egyptian gadget over here is used to check what's to be served, catechin as, and there what is this location, this gist, a catechin as, and tact in check, adagin, association, upon tates, T-A, and then the A-E, reading is an E-S, upon tates. Here, peed at his gist, here in the way of this location, catechin is, that what is served in as, the catechin as, and hidden it has, hidden is usually something in the hand, beheld, and hidden it has at a kano, it's not article anymore, the L is followed by the A, so this becomes a N-O, and hidden it has at a kano, a kano meaning gray-haired or white-haired, and that fits in real good with this catechin, the short transitional second phase of the hair growth, lasting about 2 to 3 weeks, where active growth stops, full grown, in its type, and the hair follicle shrinks, detaches from the blood supply. This jizz, this place of catechin, as full grown and breaks off from the blood supply, and hidden it has at a kano, all that gray hair. So this is getting long, but I want to talk about this, and I'll make another movie and go through this. But you can see it's talking about the cat, both in the Greek, the cat icon, and here in Excel menu, in front, the female cat. And I'll talk about this in the next movie. But this word yammer, and yammer, it's actually not yammer. And the IA, I say it reads as a ummer. So sometimes it is yammer, but it's spelled different. In order to spell yammer, you wouldn't spell it with a Y, because it would make this into a U. It would be a double letter, the second one reading as a Y, and then you would have a yammer. But this is an ummer. And an ummer is, I go in, I make these, and I don't have a script to follow. And so when I go cutting these, I cut out a bunch of and it's because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. A wise in it has. And so I'm not following a script. I'm reading this as I go. I don't memorize it. I read it as I go. And so when I'm cutting these, I cut out a bunch of them. You don't hear them. I'll probably leave some in, but and and so when you're reading it with the A's backwards, it's and ummers, and it's thinking about what you're gonna say, thinking about what you're doing, and ummers, and ummers on a nose. And like I say, this word here, I found it in an old German dictionary, and this P or F between the EIE reads as a S, and it's a wizen. It means a philosopher, somebody who actually thinks about what they're saying, and ummer. And I'll talk about these cats here that were created, not man. It was on there upon cat, the icon, a sphinx. And I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.